Welcome back, focused learners. If you're currently gearing up for your Grade 12 National Senior Certificate Economics exam, well, you're in the right place. Today, our one and only goal is to help you totally master Chapter 6, The Dynamics of Perfect Markets. We're going to take all that dense theory, the formulas, and yes, those tricky graphs, and break them down into something that actually makes sense.
Look, I know exactly how it feels. Exam pressure is creeping up, and when you open your textbook to Chapter 6, bam! You're hit with a giant wall of dry formulas, shifting curves, and economic definitions that just blur together. It's totally normal to feel overwhelmed. But hey, take a deep breath. In this explainer, we're going to translate all of that textbook jargon into a clear, logical framework. By the end of this, you won't just be memorizing stuff, you'll actually understand the mechanics of how it all works.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with perfect market essentials, then tackle costs, revenue, and profit. After that, we'll zoom in on the individual producer, figure out how to find equilibrium, walk through drawing graphs step by step, and finally wrap it all up with market comparisons. Let's get into it.
Starting right off with Section 1, Perfect Market Essentials.
Okay, it all begins with this core definition. Perfect competition is simply a market structure with large numbers of producers and buyers. I know, it sounds almost too simple, right? But this specific dynamic, having so many people involved that absolutely no single buyer or seller has any real power, is the vital building block for every single formula and concept we're about to cover.
Let's really unpack this. For a market to be considered perfect, it has to follow some pretty strict, idealized rules. Imagine a massive, chaotic farmer's market where literally hundreds of vendors are selling the exact same type of apples. First off, everyone has equal access to production technology. Second, there are absolutely zero barriers to entry or exit. That means new businesses can jump in or pack up whenever they want, no penalty. Third, everybody, buyers and sellers, has perfectly accurate market information. And because the products are perfectly homogeneous, totally identical, and there are countless sellers, well, no single participant has the power to set the market price.
And because nobody can set the price, we get our next absolutely crucial term, the price taker. An individual producer in a perfect market is a price taker. They have zero say in what they charge. None. If the market dictates that the price for a bushel of wheat is 50 Rand, that farmer has to accept 50 Rand. Think about it. If they try to be cheeky and charge 51 Rand, buyers will just walk right past them to the millions of other sellers offering the exact same wheat for 50. They literally have to take the price determined by the broader market.
All right, moving on to Section 2. We're getting into the math. Costs, revenue, and profit.
Now, there are three main revenue formulas you need to lock into your brain, and I'll act as your translator here. Total revenue, or TR, is simply your total income. It's just price multiplied by quantity. Easy enough. Average revenue is that total revenue divided by the quantity. But here's the one I really want you to focus on: marginal revenue. Marginal revenue is the extra income a business gets by selling just one single extra unit. Actually, a good rule of thumb for your exam, whenever you see the word marginal in economics, just translate it in your head to one more.
So, the crucial takeaway here is this specific equation. MR equals MC. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Write this down, highlight it, star it. This is the golden rule of profit maximization. To minimize your losses or maximize your profits, a business has to produce right up to the exact point where the revenue from selling one more unit perfectly equals the cost of producing that one more unit. If you get greedy and produce past that point, your costs are going to start outpacing your revenue and your profits will start to shrink.
Let's transition into Section 3, the individual producer.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. Let's contrast the massive industry as a whole against the single individual producer. The overall industry has your standard diagonal supply and demand curves, and those cross to create the market equilibrium price. But remember our friend the price taker? Because they are locked into that industry price, it forces the individual producer's demand curve to be totally flat, just a perfectly horizontal line. For this specific business, demand is exactly equal to average revenue, which is exactly equal to marginal revenue.
And the math brilliantly illustrates why this happens. Imagine the market price is completely locked at 5 across all quantities. The producer can't change it. So because the price is fixed at 5, every single time they sell one more unit, their total revenue goes up by exactly $5. Therefore, both the average revenue and the marginal revenue are always going to equal exactly 5. It never wavers. It's a straight line.
On to Section 4, finding equilibrium. This is all about surviving the market.
To grasp equilibrium, we have to contrast two different time frames, the short run and the long run.
In the short run, where only your variable factors of production can change, it's kind of the Wild West. A firm might rake in massive supernormal economic profits, they might suffer an economic loss, or they might just break even. But the long run, that's a different story. Because there are no barriers to entry, the second people see you making supernormal profits, new businesses will flood into the market to get a piece of the pie. That extra supply drives the market price down. Eventually, this dynamic forces every single firm into making only normal profit.
So what exactly is a normal profit? Normal profit is the bare minimum earnings an entrepreneur needs to not just pack up their bags and leave the industry entirely. It is, essentially, the break-even point. It happens right when average revenue equals average cost, or total revenue equals total cost. The business isn't getting filthy rich, but they're making just enough of a return to justify staying in the game.
Now compare that break-even reality against actually taking a hit. If a firm's average revenue dips below their average cost, they are officially taking an economic loss. And here's a super important concept for your exam, the shutdown point. If the market price falls so low that it is actually below the firm's average variable cost, the business has to shut its doors immediately. It's game over. And interestingly enough, that exact shutdown point marks the very beginning of a firm's supply curve.
All right, Section 5. Let's take all this theory and actually draw it.
Seriously, do not let these graphs intimidate you. They are essentially just a recipe. Step 1, always start by drawing your vertical and horizontal axes, and crucially, listen, this is a very common exam mistake, make sure they meet at the origin and label it with a 0. Step 2, clearly label your vertical axis as price or cost. Step 3, label the horizontal axis as quantity. From there, you just carefully sketch in your flat MR curve, your U-shaped average cost curve, and the swooping Nike tick shape of the marginal cost curve. Just ensure that your profit maximization rule, where MR equals MC, is your anchor point. If you follow those steps, you'll be golden.
Almost there. Section 6, Market Comparisons.
Let's zoom out and look at the big picture, because there are extreme differences between market structures. Perfect competition, as we've seen, has completely free entry and perfectly homogeneous products. Contrast that with a monopoly. A monopoly has one single seller, a totally unique product, and completely blocked entry. Honestly, that's exactly why authorities like the Competition Commission exist in South Africa, to monitor that kind of anti-competitive behavior. And then sitting right in the middle, you have an oligopoly, which is dominated by just a few firms selling differentiated products, where entry is tough but not impossible. Recognizing these stark contrasts really helps cement exactly why our perfectly competitive firm behaves the way it does.
All right, let's lock this whole thing in with a rapid-fire revision checklist. To crush this section on your exam, you absolutely must be able to confidently define perfect competition and the price taker. You need to memorize those TR, MR, and AR formulas. You have to burn the golden rule into your memory. MR equals MC for profit maximization. And finally, please practice drawing those axes with the proper price, quantity, and origin labels.
So there you have it. You now have a solid logical understanding of the dynamics of perfect markets, from the basic definitions right down to the math and the graphs. But here is something to chew on. Perfect markets are incredibly, incredibly rare in the real world. Now that you know the pristine rules of perfect competition, are you ready to analyze how monopoly completely distorts them for their own gain? Keep that curiosity alive, keep practicing those graphs, and we will see you in the next explainer.